Good afternoon, Coach Slack here once again, continuing our readings on the Ladder of Divine Ascent by St. John Climacus. Step 27, On Holy Stillness of Body and Soul. We are like bought slaves under contract to unholy passions. We, therefore, know to some extent the whims, ways, wills, and wiles of the spirits that rule over our poor souls. But there are others who, through the operation of the Holy Spirit, and by reason of their liberation from those spirits, are enlightened as to their tricks. The former, being in a painful state of sickness, can only guess about the relief which would come with good health, while the latter, being in a healthy condition, are able to recognize and draw conclusions about the miseries attendant on sickness. That is why we, who are weak and infirm, hesitate to philosophize in our discourse about the haven of stillness, for we know that at the table of the good brotherhood there is always some cur watching to snatch from it a piece of bread, that is, a soul, and it then runs off with it in its mouth and devours it in solitude. We do not want our discourse to give room to that dog and an opportunity to those who are looking for opportunities. And for this reason we do not consider it permissible to talk about peace to the courageous warriors of our King who are struggling in the battle. We will simply remark that crowns of peace and tranquility are woven for those who do not flag in the fight, but we do not want to grieve anyone by speaking of other things without even mentioning this. And so we shall, if you wish, speak briefly about stillness, if only in order to explain what it is. Stillness of the body is the knowledge and composure of the habits and feelings, and stillness of soul is the knowledge of one's thoughts and an inviolable mind. A friend of stillness is a courageous and decisive thought, which keeps constant vigil at the doors of the heart, and kills or repels the thoughts that come. He who practices silence with perception of heart will understand this last remark, but he who is yet a child is unaware and ignorant of it. A discerning hesychast will have no need of words, since he is enlightened by deeds rather than by words. The beginning of stillness is to throw off all noise as disturbing for the depths of the soul, and the end of it is not to fear disturbances, but to remain insensible to them. He who in actually going out does not go out is gentle and holy, a house of love. He is not easily moved to speech, and he cannot be moved to anger. The opposite of this is obvious. A hesychast is he who strives to confine his incorporeal being within his bodily house, paradoxical as this is. The cat keeps hold of her mouse, and the thought of the hesychast holds its spiritual mouse. Do not call this example rubbish. If you do, then you do not yet know what stillness means. A monk living with another monk is not like a monk living as a solitary. When a monk is alone, he has need of great vigilance and of an unwandering mind. The former is often helped by his brother, but an angel assists the latter. The noetic hosts unite in worship with him whose soul is quiet, and dwell lovingly with him. I shall not speak to you of the opposite to this. The depth of the dogmas is profound, and the mind of the hesychast sleeps over them safely. It is not safe to swim in one's clothes, nor should a slave of passion touch theology. The cell of the hesychast is the confines of his body. He has within a shrine of knowledge. He who is sick in soul from some passion and attempts stillness is like a man who has jumped from a ship into the sea and thinks that he will reach the shore safely on a plank. For all who are struggling with their clay, stillness is suitable at the right time, if only they have a director, for angelic strength is needed for the solitary life. I speak of those who lead a life of real stillness of body and soul. The hesychast who has become lazy will tell lies, urging people by hints to end his stillness for him, and having left his cell, he blames the devils. He has not discovered that he is his own devil. I have seen hesychasts who insatiably nourished their flaming desire for God through stillness, generating fire by fire, love by love, desire by desire. The hesychast is an earthly image of an angel who, with the paper of love and letters of zeal, has freed his prayer from sloth and negligence. The hesychast is he who openly declares, O God, ready is my heart. The hesychast is he who says, I sleep, but my heart waketh. Shut the door of your cell to your body, the door of your tongue to speech, and the inner gate to evil spirits. The patience of the sailor is tested in the midday heat, or when he is becalmed, and the lack of necessities tries the perseverance of the hesychast. When the one grows discouraged, he swims in the water, and when the other becomes despondent, he mixes with crowds. Do not fear the noises of prankish demons, for morning does not know cowardice and is not scared by them. Those whose mind has learned true prayer converse with the Lord face to face, as if speaking into the ear of the emperor. Those who make vocal prayer fall down before him, as if in the presence of the whole Senate. But those who live in the world petition the emperor amidst the clamor of all the crowds. If you have learned the art of prayer scientifically, you cannot fail to know what I have said. Take up your seat on a high place and watch, if only you know how, and then you will see in what manner, when, whence, how many, and what kind of thieves come to enter and steal your clusters of grapes. When the watchman grows weary, he stands up and prays, and then he sits down again and courageously takes up his former task. One who has learnt about this from experience wanted to tell others about it exactly and in detail, but he was afraid in case he should damp the enthusiasm of those already practicing it, or frighten off with the noise of his words those who were making up their minds to embark upon it. He who discourses subtly and discerningly on stillness stirs up the demons against himself, for there is no one else who can so expose their indecencies. He who has attained to stillness has penetrated to the very depths of the mysteries, but he would never have descended into the deep unless he has first seen and heard the noise of the waves and the evil spirits, and perhaps even been splashed by these waves. The great apostle Paul confirms what we have said. If he had not been caught up into paradise, as into stillness, he could never have heard the unspeakable words. The ear of the Hezekiah will receive from God marvelous words. This is why in the book of Job that all-wise man said, "Will not my ear receive marvelous things from him?" The Hezekiah is one who flees all men, though without hatred, just as another hastens to them, though without enthusiasm. He does not wish to be hindered from partaking of the sweetness of God. Go and distribute immediately, because to sell would take a long time, all that thou hast, and give to the poor. Monks, so that in their prayers they may accompany you to stillness. And take up thy cross, and carry it with the help of obedience, and vigorously bear the burden of the loss of thy will, and come and follow me to union with most blessed stillness, and I will teach you the visible activity and life of the spiritual powers. They never weary of praising their Maker to all eternity, and he who ascends to the heaven of stillness never ceases to praise his Creator. Immaterial spirits will not think about the material, nor will those who have become immaterial in a material body think about food. The first will not be aware of food, and the second will need no promise of it. The former do not think about money and possessions, nor do the latter think about the malice of the evil spirits. Those in heaven above have no desire for the visible creation, and those here on earth below have no desire for things perceived by the senses. The former will never cease to advance in love, and the latter vie with them daily. Those are well aware of the wealth of their progress, and these are conscious of their love of the ascent. Those will not stop until they reach the seraphim, and these will not weary until they become angels. Blessed is he who hopes, thrice blessed is he who shall receive, but he who possesses is an angel. Different aspects of stillness and how to distinguish them. In all the sciences, as everyone knows, there are differences of opinion and aim, for everything is not perfect in all, either from want of industry or from lack of strength. Therefore, some enter this harbor, or rather this sea, or perhaps this abyss, because they lack control of their tongue, or because of a past habit of the body. Others because they are without control of their temper, and the poor wretches cannot overcome this in a crowded society. Others because out of conceit they have judged it better to sail under their own rule than under direction. Others because amidst material things they cannot abstain from such. Some with the intention of cultivating zeal by the solitary life, others to torment themselves secretly for their faults, and some in order to acquire glory for themselves from it. Others again, if only the Son of Man, when he comes, may find such on earth, are wedded to holy stillness out of delight and a thirst for the love and sweetness of God. But they do not achieve this union before they have divorced all despondency, because fellowship with despondency would seem like adultery to anyone who is united with God. As far as my meager knowledge permits, for I am like an unskilled architect, I have constructed a ladder of ascent. Let each look to see on which step he is standing. Is it self-will, or human glory, or weakness of tongue, or hot temper, or too great attachment? Is it to make return for faults, or to grow more zealous, or to add fire to fire? The last shall be first, and the first last. The first 7 are the activities of this world's week, some acceptable and some unacceptable. But the 8th clearly bears the seal of the age to come. Watch, solitary monk, be vigilant at the times when wild beasts prowl, otherwise you will not be able to adapt your snares to them. If despondency, which you have divorced, has completely left you, then the task will be superfluous. But if she still puts herself forward, then I do not know how you can live in stillness. Why did the holy fathers of Tabanisi never have so many lights as those of the Skiti? Those of you who can understand this, I cannot speak, or rather, I do not wish to. Some diminish the passions, others sing psalms and spend most of their time in prayer, while some apply themselves to divine vision and spend their life in this profound vision. Let the question be investigated after the manner of the latter. He who is able to receive this, let him receive it in the Lord. There are indolent souls living in monasteries, and by indulging in what nourishes their indolence, they come to complete ruin. But there are also souls who, through living with others, strip themselves of their indolence. And the same thing often occurs not only with the careless, but with the zealous too. We can apply the same rule to stillness. Stillness has received many experienced men, but has rejected them by reason of their self-rule, and shown them to be lovers of pleasure. Others she has taken, and by fear and the concern for the burden of their condemnation, has made them zealous and fervent. He who is still troubled by bad temper and conceit, by hypocrisy and remembrance of wrongs, should never dare to set foot on the way of stillness, lest he become deranged and nothing else. But if anyone is clear of these, he will know what is best, and yet I think, perhaps not even he. Here are the signs, courses, and proofs of those who are practicing stillness in the right way: an unruffled mind, purified thought, rapture towards the Lord, recollection of eternal torments, the urgency of death, constant hunger for prayer, unsleeping vigilance, wasting away of lust, ignorance of attachment, death to the world, loss of gluttony, foundation of theology, a well of discernment, a truce accompanied by tears, loss of talkativeness, and many such things which the common run of men are wont to find quite alien to themselves. And here are the signs of those who are practicing stillness in the wrong way: dearth of spiritual wealth, increase of anger, a hoard of resentment, diminution of love, growth of vanity, and I will be silent about all the rest which follow. But our chapter has now reached a point at which we must consider the case of those living in obedience, all the more so because this chapter is especially meant for them. The signs of those who are lawfully, unadulterously, and sincerely wedded to this orderly and fair obedience, both in reality and according to the teaching of the inspired fathers, are these: and every day, if only we have consecrated a day to the Lord, they reach forward and obtain increase in progress, so that they become perfect in due time. An increase of elementary humility, a lessening of bad temper, for how can it not decrease as the gall is exhausted? Dissipation of darkness, accession of love, estrangement from passions, deliverance from hatred, diminution of lust through continual rebuke, ignorance of despondency, increase of zeal, compassionate love, banishment of pride. This is the achievement which all should seek, but few attain. A well without water does not deserve the name, and what follows, he who is capable of thought already knows. A young wife who has not been faithful to her marriage bed has defiled her body, and a soul who has not been faithful to his vow has defiled his spirit. Reproach, hatred, thrashings, and, most piteous of all, separation will befall the first. The other will have to face pollution, forgetfulness of death, insatiability of stomach, lack of control of the eyes, working for vainglory, pining for sleep, hardening of the heart, deadness and insensitivity, a depository of thoughts, an increase of consent, captivity of the heart, disturbance of work, disobedience, contradiction, attachment, unbelief, uncertainty of heart, talkativeness, and worst of all, free familiarity. And still more wretched, a heart without compunction, which, in the negligent, is followed by insensibility, the mother of demons and falls. Out of the 8 evil spirits, 5 assail those practicing stillness, and 3 those living in obedience. He who is practicing stillness and fighting despondency often suffers great harm. For the time which should be given to prayer and divine vision, he wastes in tricks and wrestlings to battle against it. Once, having become slack, I was sitting in my cell and almost thinking of leaving it. But some people came to me and began to praise me, not a little as a hesychast, and at once the thought of slackness gave place to the thought of vainglory, and I was amazed at how these three-horned demon opposes all other spirits. Observe every hour the slaps and cuffs, the inclinations and changes of your companion, the spirit of despondency, and see how and where they are directed. He who has obtained serenity through the Holy Spirit is familiar with this spectacle. The preliminary task of stillness is the disengagement from all affairs, whether reasonable or senseless, for he who allows even reasonable ones will certainly fall into those which are not. The second task of stillness is earnest prayer, and the third is the inviolable activity of the heart. It is naturally impossible for one who does not know the alphabet to study books. It is still more impossible for one who has not attained to the first to rightly practice the last two tasks. Engaged in the middle task, I was among the middle orders, and an angel enlightened me, thirsting as I was. And again I was among them, and when I asked what was the Lord before he took visible form, the prince of the heavenly host could not tell me, for he was not allowed. So I asked him, in what state is he now? He replied, in the state proper to him, but not in this, our state. I asked, what is the meaning of the standing and sitting at the right hand of the Father? He said, it is impossible to be initiated into these mysteries by hearing with the human ear. I thereupon implored him to lead me where my longings drew me, and he said, the hour has not yet come, because the fire of incorruption does not yet burn sufficiently within you. Whether I was then with this clay, I know not, or out of it, I am quite unable to say. It is difficult to overcome the midday nap, especially in the summertime. Then, and perhaps only then, is manual work permissible. In my experience, the demon of despondency prepares and clears the way for the demon of lust, so that by violently weakening the body and plunging it in sleep, the latter may produce pollutions in those practicing stillness by means of a lifelike dream. If you resist these demons vigorously, then they will certainly launch a violent attack upon you in order to make you stop your labors, on the ground that you are doing yourself no good. But nothing can prove the defeat of the demons so clearly as the violence with which they attack us. When you go forth, guard what you have gathered. When the cage is opened, the birds fly out, and then we shall find no further profit in stillness. A small hair disturbs the eye, and a small care ruins stillness, because stillness is the banishment of thoughts and the rejection of even reasonable cares. He who has really attained to stillness does not give a thought to his flesh, for he who has promised will not prove false. He who wishes to present his mind pure to God and is agitated by cares is like a man who has tied his legs tightly together and then expects to walk briskly. Those who are thoroughly versed in secular philosophy are indeed rare, but I affirm that those who have a divine knowledge of the philosophy of true stillness are still more rare. He who has not yet known God is unfit for stillness and exposes himself to many dangers. Stillness chokes the inexperienced. Not having tasted the sweetness of God, they waste time in being taken captive, robbed, made despondent, and subjected to distractions. He who has experienced the good which comes from prayer will shun crowds like a wild ass. For what, if not prayer, makes him like a wild ass and free from all association with people? He who is gripped by passions and lives in the desert allows his mind to listen to their chatter. So the holy elder, George Arasalates, who is not entirely unknown to your reverence, once told me and taught me. He once directed my worthless soul, and, guiding me to stillness, he said, I have noticed that, in the morning, it is usually the demons of vainglory and concupine. This word always gets me. Concupiscence, who make assaults upon us at midday. The demons of despondency, repining, and anger, and in the evening those dung-loving tyrants of the wretched stomach. It is better to live as a Cenobite in poverty and obedience than to be a hesychast who has no control of his mind. He who has entered into stillness in the right way and does not see its daily reward is either practicing it in the wrong way or else is being robbed of this by his self-esteem. Stillness is unceasing worship and waiting upon God. Let the remembrance of Jesus be present with each breath, and then you will know the value of stillness. For the monk under obedience, self-will is the fall. But for the hesychast, a breach in prayer is the fall. If you rejoice in having visitors to your cell, know that you are not taking a holiday from despondency alone, but from God. The model for your prayer should be the widow who was wronged by her adversary, and for your stillness, the great and angelic hesychast Arsenius. Remember in your solitude the life of this great solitary, and see how often he sent away those who came to him, so as to not lose the good part. My experience is that the demons often persuade foolish busybodies to visit true hesychasts, so as to use even such as those to throw some hindrance in the way of these active men. Look out for such people, and do not be afraid of offending these idle bodies by your devout behavior, because as a result of this offense they will perhaps stop their meddlesomeness, and see that you do not mistakenly offend a soul who, in his thirst, has come to draw water from you. In all things you need the light of discretion. The light of those practicing stillness, and especially those who are quite alone, should be guided by conscience and common sense. He who runs his race in the right way and performs all his undertakings, utterances, thoughts, each step, every intention, and every movement according to the Lord, works for the Lord's sake with feeling of soul as though in the Lord's presence. If he is robbed, he is not yet living virtuously. I will unfold, says someone, my problem and my purpose on the psaltery, according to my still imperfect judgment. As for me, I shall offer my will to God in prayer, and from him I shall receive assurance. Faith is the wing of prayer. Without it, my prayer will return again to my bosom. Faith is the unshaken firmness of the soul, unmoved by any adversity. A believer is not one who thinks that God can do everything, but one who believes that he will obtain all things. Faith is the agent of things unhoped for, and the thief proved this. The mother of faith is hardship and an honest heart. The latter makes faith constant, and the former builds it up. Faith is the mother of hesychast, for if he does not believe, how can he practice stillness? He who is chained up in prison fears the judge who sentences him, but the hermit in a cell begets fear of the Lord, and the tribunal is not so terrifying to the former as the throne of the judge is to the latter. You need great fear for stillness, excellent man, because nothing else is so effective in dispelling despondency. The convict is continually looking to see when the judge will come to the prison, and the true worker wonders when the angel of death will come. A burden of sorrow fetters the former, but a fountain of tears binds the latter. Bring out the staff of patience, and the dogs will soon stop their insolence. Patience is an unbroken labor of the soul, which is never shaken by deserved or undeserved blows. The patient man is a faultless worker who turns his fault into victories. Patience is the limitation of suffering that is accepted day by day. Patience lays aside all excuses and all attention to herself. The worker needs patience more than his food, because the one brings him a crown, while the other may bring ruin. The patient man has died long before he is placed in the tomb, having made his cell his tomb. Hope engenders patience, and so does mourning, but he who has neither is a slave of despondency. Christ's warrior should know what foes to parry from a distance, and which to fight at close quarters. Sometimes the combat has earned a crown, sometimes refusal has made men reprobate. It is not feasible to lay down precepts in such matters, for we do not all have the same character or dispositions. There is one spirit on which you should keep a vigilant eye. He is the one who assails you unceasingly during your standing, walking, sitting, movement, rising, prayer, and sleep. Not all loaves of the heavenly wheat of this spiritual food have the same appearance. In the course of stillness, the preeminent ever practice the following activity within themselves. I beheld the Lord ever before me, but others, in your patience, possess ye your souls. Some, watch and pray. Others, prepare thy works for thy death. Some, I was brought low and he saved me. Some, the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the future glory. And others always have in mind the words, lest he snatch you away and there be none to deliver you. For all run, but one receives the prize without effort. He who makes progress works not only when awake, but when asleep as well. So even in their dreams, some snub the demons who approach them by admonishing dissolute women concerning chastity. But do not expect visits. Do not prepare for them beforehand, because the state of stillness is perfectly simple and free. No one intending to build a tower and a cell of stillness will approach this work without first sitting down and counting the cost, and he will feel this way by prayer, considering whether he has within him the necessary means for completing it, so that he should not lay the foundation, and then become a laughingstock to his enemies and an obstacle to other workers. Examine the sweetness you feel in your soul, lest it be compounded craftily by cruel physicians, or rather treacherous ones. Devote the greater part of the night to prayer, and only what is left to recital of the Psalter. And during the day, again, prepare yourself according to your strength. Reading enlightens the mind considerably and helps it concentrate, for those are the Holy Spirit's words, and they attune those who attend to them. Let what you read lead you to action, for you are a doer. Putting these words into practice makes further reading superfluous. Seek to be enlightened by the words of salvation through your labors, and not merely from books. Until you receive spiritual power, do not study works of an allegorical nature, because they are dark words, and they darken the weak. Often 1 cup of wine is sufficient to reveal its flavor, and 1 word of the hesychast makes known to those who can taste it his whole inner state and activity. Have the eye of your soul fixed firm against conceit or self-opinion, for nothing is so banefully destructive. When you leave your cell, be sparing with your tongue, because it can scatter in a moment the fruits of many labors. Try to be free of curiosity, for it can defile stillness as nothing can. Offer to those who visit you what is necessary both for the body and for the soul. If they are wiser than we are, let us show our philosophy by silence. And if they are brethren following the same way of life, let us open the door of speech to them in due measure. Yet it is better to regard all as superior to us. I wanted to forbid those who are still children of all bodily work at the time of vigil, but he who carried sand all night in his cloak restrained me. What is said in the dogma of the holy, uncreated, and adorable Trinity contrasts with the doctrine of this providential incarnation of one of the persons of this all-hymned Trinity. For what is plural in the Trinity is single in him, and what there is single here is plural. And in the same way, some undertakings are suitable for those in stillness, and others for those in obedience. The divine apostle says, "Who has known the mind of the Lord?" And I will say, "Who has known the mind of the man who is a hesychast in body and spirit?" The power of a king consists in his wealth and the numbers of his subjects. The power of a hesychast in abundance and richness of prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.